Sometimes when you are a God seeker, when you are someone who loves God and draws near to God, and yet you go through problems, many a times we wonder why it's happening to us. But today I want to tell you, because you are a God seeker does not mean that you are not going to go through your trials and tests, does not mean that you will not face the wilderness. There are going to be valley moments. When we open into the Bible, we will see how the righteous also are going through their struggles. But what makes a big difference in the life of a righteous person is the hope that they have, the hope that they carry. When we open to Luke chapter 1 verse 5 to 7, he says, "There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah. His wife was of the daughter of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless." Now we see here, it says they both, that means husband and wife, are God seekers. It says, and they both were righteous before God. Now the Bible speaks of them being right before the eyes of God. That's an amazing compliment to receive from God. They were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless, it says. What a perfect appreciation given by God. God is speaking about them. God is declaring that they are blameless, that they are righteous. But when you open to the next verse, when you go to the next verse, we see the word but there. You see, but they had no child, but they were in a problem, but they were in a crisis. Now, being a righteous people, being God seekers, being God lovers, yet they have a crisis in their life. It says they had no child because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well advanced in years. Now we see here, they are God seekers, they are people who love God, and yet in a crisis. They have no child. If you open to Genesis, you see one of the blessings that God gives upon mankind is to be fruitful and multiply. And here we see people connected to God, and yet they are not fruitful. But one thing we need to understand is, though they are not fruitful, though they have no child for that moment, and if you look at the situation, they are well advanced in years, it says, and yet in that situation, they were still God seekers. They did not stop seeking God. Just like the book of Habakkuk, the prophet declares in Habakkuk chapter 3 verse 17 to 18, he says, "Though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation." So the prophet there is saying, though things may not work right, yet I will stay connected to God. Yet I will rejoice in God. You see, the prophet is speaking about his hope in God. So we see the prophet saying, even though after being a God seeker, after being a God praiser, still things don't happen, I'm not going to stop seeking God. You see, many a times when things don't work well in our lives, when that but comes, because of that word, because things are not working right, many people give up, many people leave midway. But here we see Zacharias and Elizabeth are still seekers of God. In verse 8 we see he went to serve God. According to the lot that came upon him, he was serving God. He did not give up on God. And I want to tell you, even in your crisis, when you don't give up on God, when you keep holding on to God, I want to tell you with great assurance, your hope will never disappoint. We look at the end of Zacharias and Elizabeth's story. They had a child of their own. They kept seeking God, and God turned their story around. From shame, he took them to glory. From their test, he made a testimony. The end is always glorious. Today I want to tell you who's watching, your end is always going to be glorious. Don't give up midway. Because things are not working right does not mean that God's not going to turn things around for you. Elizabeth and Zacharias, though they went through a great time of test and trial, we see their end glorious. Stick on to God. Don't give up. Press on, because God will turn your story around.